I was just fixing a kitchen sink. That's all it was supposed to be. But when a 51-year-old woman looks you straight in the eye and asks if she can kiss you, everything changes. This is the story of how a simple plumbing job turned my entire world upside down in ways I never saw coming. The morning started like any other Tuesday in my life. My alarm clock had been broken for 3 weeks, but my upstairs neighbor's terrible karaoke habit served as a reliable 6:30 a.m. wake-up call. Today it was My Heart Will Go On, off-key and passionate. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I rolled out of my Murphy bed in my studio apartment, stepped over yesterday's jeans, and shuffled to the kitchenette that barely qualified as a kitchen. My morning routine was a masterclass, an efficiency born from necessity. Instant coffee, because my coffee maker died 2 months ago, and I kept forgetting to replace it. Peanut butter toast, because bread and peanut butter were the only things in my fridge that hadn't expired. And checking my phone for work messages while trying to ignore the 17 texts from my mother about Thanksgiving dinner plans. It was still September. I'm Alan, by the way, Alan Mitchell, 48 years old, certified plumber, and the owner of Mitchell Plumbing Solutions, which sounds way more impressive than it actually is. It's basically just me, my van, and enough tools to handle most residential disasters. I started the business 2 years ago after working for Henderson Plumbing for 5 years, watching my boss charge people 3 times what the job was worth, while paying me next to nothing. My apartment reflected my current financial situation. Functional, but not fancy. The Murphy bed was a necessity, not a style choice. The single window faced an alley, but at least it let in natural light. I had a small TV, a gaming chair I'd bought used, and enough space to store my equipment when I wasn't working. It wasn't much, but it was mine, and I was slowly building something. After my gourmet breakfast, I grabbed my thermos and filled it with the questionable coffee. My phone buzzed with a new service request through my website, something I'd built myself. Using YouTube tutorials and stubborn determination, the customer was Victoria Chambers, address on Rosewood Drive, kitchen sink backup, urgent repair needed. The message was polite but stressed the importance of quick service. Rosewood Drive, I knew the area. Older homes, less established neighborhood. The kind of place where people actually invested in proper repairs instead of duct tape solutions. These calls usually paid well, which my bank account desperately needed. I'd had a slow month. My van payment was due next week. I threw on my work clothes, jeans, with permanent stains that told the story of various plumbing adventures. A gray t-shirt with Mitchell Plumbing Solutions printed in fading blue letters, my work boots that had seen better decades. Grabbed my tool bag, my portable snake, and the emergency kit I kept for jobs that turned out to be worse than advertised. The van started on the 3rd try, which was actually pretty good for her. She was a 2015 Ford Transit that I'd bought with more miles than I cared to count, but she was reliable enough and had space for all my equipment. The sides were painted white with my business name and phone number in professional-looking letters. My dad had helped me with the design before he moved to Florida. Look legitimate, he'd said, even when you're just starting out. Pulled out of my apartment complex, a forgettable beige building with a parking lot that collected more potholes than cars, and headed toward Rosewood Drive. The September morning was crisp, with that hint of autumn that made me think about changing. Seasons and new beginnings. The radio played soft rock while I mentally prepared for the job ahead. Kitchen sink backups were usually straightforward. Hair and food buildup in the drain, maybe a small clog in the P-trap that could be cleared with a snake or some careful disassembly. Worst case scenario, I'd need to access the main line, but that was unlikely in a kitchen situation. I estimated 2 hours, maybe 3, if there were complications. Rosewood Drive turned out to be exactly what I'd expected. Tree-lined street with mature oaks, creating a canopy over well-maintained sidewalks. The houses were a mix of architectural styles from different decades, but all clearly cared for. Manicured lawns, flower beds transitioning from summer blooms to fall colors, mailboxes that matched front doors. This was the kind of neighborhood where people knew their neighbors' names and brought casseroles when someone was sick. Number 1247 was a two-story colonial with cream-colored siding and dark green shutters. The front yard featured a garden that looked professionally designed, but personally maintained, not the sterile perfection of a landscaping service. The thoughtful touches of someone who actually enjoyed working with plants. Stone pathway led to a front porch with 2 rocking chairs and a small table between them. I parked in the driveway behind a blue Honda Accord that looked well cared for, but not new. Practical choice, reliable, the kind of car that prioritized function over flash. I grabbed my basic toolkit and my tablet for taking notes and photos of practice I'd developed to help with estimates and follow-up work. The front porch had a welcome mat that said "Home is where the heart is" in elegant script. The doorbell actually worked, playing a simple 2-tone chime instead of the broken buzzer I'd expected. I could hear movement inside, footsteps approaching the door. When the door opened, my prepared professional greeting died somewhere between my brain and my mouth. She was beautiful, but not in the way that stops traffic or launches magazines. She was beautiful in the way that makes you want to know her story. Mid-50s, with dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail that had escaped strands framing her face. She wore jeans and a light blue sweater that complemented her eyes and her hands. I noticed hands, occupational habit, showed the kind of wear that came from real work, not just occasional gardening. "You must be Alan," she said, and her voice had a warmth that made my name sound better than it ever had. "I'm Victoria. Thank you so much for coming so quickly." We shook hands, and I noticed her grip was firm and confident, the handshake of someone comfortable in her own skin. There was something about her that immediately put me at ease, while simultaneously making me more aware of myself than I'd been. In months, no problem, I managed, finding my professional voice again. "Let's take a look at what's giving you trouble." Little did I know that the real trouble was just beginning, and it had nothing to do with kitchen sinks. Victoria led me through her front hallway, and I couldn't help but notice how the house felt like a home. Not the sterile perfection of a magazine spread, but the lived-in warmth of someone who'd taken time to make their space personal. Family photos lined the hallway walls. A younger Victoria with a teenage girl who shared her eyes. Vacation. Pictures from various beaches and mountains, moments captured over years of building a life. "The kitchen's through here," she said, gesturing toward the back of the house. Fair warning, it's a bit of a disaster zone right now. She wasn't exaggerating. The kitchen was clearly in the middle of a renovation project that had been temporarily halted by the plumbing emergency. Cabinet doors were stacked against one wall. Countertops were covered with protective plastic, and painting supplies sat neatly organized on a folding table. Despite the chaos, I could see the bones of something beautiful: high ceilings, original hardwood floors, and large windows that filled the space with natural light. "I know it looks like a war zone," Victoria said, following my gaze around. "The room, I've been doing a slow renovation." Emphasis on slow. I can only tackle it on weekends and evenings after work. The sink in question was a beautiful farmhouse-style basin that looked recently installed. Unfortunately, it was currently holding about 3 inches of murky water that smelled faintly of food and frustration. "When did you first notice the backup?" I asked, setting my tool bag down and pulling out my tablet to make notes. "Yesterday morning. I was washing dishes from dinner the night before, and the water just stopped draining. I tried that liquid drain cleaner from the hardware store, but it didn't help. If anything, it made the smell worse." I nodded, already forming a hypothesis. Chemical drain cleaners can sometimes make things worse, especially if there's a solid blockage. They can create a nasty soup instead of clearing the problem. Victoria winced. I was afraid of that. I'm usually pretty handy with basic repairs, but plumbing intimidates me. Too many opportunities for catastrophic flooding. "Smart policy," I said, kneeling down to examine the pipes under the sink. "Mind if I take a look at the setup down here?"
Please.
"Be my guest. Can I get you anything? Coffee? Water?" "Coffee would be amazing, actually," I said, already working on removing the pet trap. If it's not too much trouble, no trouble at all. I was just about to make a pot anyway. While Victoria moved around the kitchen, I focused on the plumbing. The installation was recent and professionally done, which would make my job easier. The backup was likely in the trap or the connecting pipes rather than a major line issue. As I carefully removed the curved section of pipe, the source of the problem became immediately apparent. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "Found your culprit?" I called out, holding up the P-trap that was completely clogged with a combination of food particles, grease, and what looked like coffee grounds. Victoria appeared beside me with 2 steaming mugs. "Oh wow, that's disgusting. How did so much stuff get down there?" "It happens gradually," I explained, accepting the coffee gratefully. "Food particles, grease from cooking, coffee grounds, they all accumulate over time. The chemical cleaner probably pushed some of it further down and compacted the rest." I took a sip of the coffee and nearly groaned with pleasure. It was perfect. Strong enough to wake the dead, but smooth enough to actually enjoy. "This is incredible coffee." Victoria smiled, looking pleased. "Thank you. I'm a bit of a coffee snob. Life's too short for bad coffee, you know." "I couldn't agree more," I said, thinking about my morning instant coffee with a touch of embarrassment. "This is the kind of coffee that makes you realize what you've been missing. You're welcome to it any time you're working on my plumbing disasters," she said, settling into one of the kitchen chairs that had been pushed against the wall. Got back to work, cleaning out the trap and checking the connecting pipes for any additional buildup. The job was straightforward, but I found myself working more slowly than usual. Drawn into conversation with Victoria in a way that felt natural and effortless. "So you're doing this renovation yourself?" I asked, reassembling the clean pipes. "Mostly. Yes. I bought the house 6 months ago, and it needed some serious updating. The previous owners were lovely people, but they hadn't touched the kitchen since 1985. Harvest gold, appliances and all." "What made you choose this neighborhood?" Victoria paused, cradling her coffee mug in both hands. "I needed a fresh start. I went through a divorce 2 years ago, and I'd been living in a condo that never felt like home. When I saw this place with all its character and potential, I knew it was where I wanted to build my next chapter." There was something in her voice, not sadness exactly, the weight of experience, of someone who'd been through something difficult and come out stronger. I found myself wanting to know more, but I didn't want to pry. "What do you do for work?" I asked instead, testing the faucet to make sure everything was flowing properly. "I'm a high school English teacher at Riverside Academy. Been there for 15 years now. I teach AP Literature and Creative Writing, mostly seniors who are convinced they know everything about life." She laughed. "To be fair, I probably thought too at 18. That must be rewarding work." "It is most days. There's something amazing about watching a student discover they actually love reading, or seeing them find their voice in their writing. Makes up for the grading papers until midnight and dealing with helicopter parents." I turned the faucet on full blast and watched the water drain smoothly and quickly. "Good news, that should take care of your problem. The drain is clear, and everything's flowing properly now." "You're a miracle worker," Victoria said, coming over to see the water swirling down the drain without hesitation. "How much do I owe you?" I did a quick calculation in my head. The job had taken about an hour, which was my minimum service call fee. $75 covers it. Victoria nodded and disappeared into another room, returning with her purse. As she counted out the bills, she said, "This might sound forward, but would you be interested in looking at a few other things while you're here? I've got a bathroom faucet that drips, and the guest shower has pressure issues. I'd be happy to pay your hourly rate." I glanced at my phone. My next appointment wasn't until 2 p.m., and I was enjoying Victoria's company more than I'd enjoyed anyone's in months. "Sure," I said. "Let's take a look." As Victoria led me upstairs to show me the other issues, I found myself studying the way she moved through her house, confident and comfortable, pointing out little details and improvements she'd made. There was something captivating about her enthusiasm for the space, her vision for what it could become. I was supposed to be fixing plumbing problems, but I was starting to realize that Victoria Chambers was fixing something in me that I hadn't even known was broken. The bathroom faucet was a simple washer replacement, and the shower pressure issue turned out to be a clogged aerator. Both easy fixes that took less than 30 minutes combined. But somehow, we ended up talking for another hour, sitting on her back porch with fresh coffee, discussing everything from her renovation plans to my business goals to our shared love of old movies. I should probably let you get to your next appointment, Victoria said eventually, though neither of us made any immediate move to end the conversation. Actually, I said, surprising myself with my boldness, my next call isn't until 2, and this is the best conversation I've had in weeks. Victoria smiled, and I noticed the way it reached her eyes, creating small lines that spoke of a woman who laughed often and genuinely. Then we should definitely keep talking. We talked until well past my scheduled departure time, and I found myself completely absorbed in Victoria's stories about her students, her renovation dreams, and the small victories of creating a life on her own terms. She had a way of listening that made me want to share things I usually kept to myself, my struggles with building the business, my fears about following in my father's footsteps of always working for someone else, my dream of maybe expanding beyond just plumbing someday. What kind of expansion? She asked, leaning forward with genuine interest. This might sound crazy, I said, surprised by my own willingness to share. But I've always been good with my hands beyond just plumbing. Carpentry, electrical work, general contracting. I keep thinking about maybe becoming a full-service handyman, helping people with entire projects instead of just fixing their pipes. That doesn't sound crazy at all, Victoria said. Sounds like someone who sees the big picture. I bet you'd be amazing at that. Something in her tone made me believe her, which was dangerous territory. I'd learned not to count on other people's faith in me. What about you? I asked, shifting the focus back to her. Always wanted to be a teacher. Victoria's expression grew thoughtful. Actually, no. I wanted to be a writer when I was younger. Novels, short stories, maybe poetry. I had all these grand plans about living in a tiny apartment in New York and writing the great American novel. What happened? Life happened, she said with a rueful smile. I met my ex-husband in college, got married right after graduation. He was practical, stable, had a clear career path. He convinced me that teaching was a more sensible choice. Steady income, good benefits, summers off to write if I wanted. So I got my teaching certification and kept telling myself I'd write. On the side, did you? For a while. But between lesson planning, grading papers, and trying to be the perfect wife, there never seemed to be enough time or energy left over for my own dreams. She paused, running her finger around the rim of her coffee cup. One published a few short stories in small literary magazines years ago, but nothing significant. Do you still write? I've been thinking about it more lately, she admitted. Since the divorce, since moving here, I feel like I'm finally in a place where I could focus on my own wants for once. It's scary and exciting at the same time. Was about to respond when my phone buzzed with a text. My 2 p.m. appointment was asking if I could come early. Reality crashed back in, reminding me that this wasn't just a social visit. I should probably head out, I said reluctantly, standing up from the porch chair. My next client is asking if I can come early. Of course, Victoria said, though I caught a flicker of disappointment in her eyes that matched my own feelings. Thank you so much for fixing everything and for ... She gestured vaguely for the conversation. I don't get to talk to adults about anything other than curriculum and grades very often. We walked back through the house toward the front door, and I gathered my tools from the kitchen. The farmhouse sink gleamed, functioning perfectly now, but I felt oddly reluctant to leave the job unfinished. Not the plumbing that was done, but whatever this was between us. As we reached the front hallway, Victoria stopped suddenly and turned to face me. Her expression had changed, become more serious, more vulnerable. Alan, she said, and something in her voice made me stop and really look. The bathroom faucet was a simple washer replacement, and the shower pressure issue turned out to be a clogged aerator. Both easy fixes that took less than 30 minutes combined. But somehow, we ended up talking for another hour, sitting on her back porch with fresh coffee, discussing everything from her renovation plans to my business goals to our shared love of old movies. I should probably let you get to your next appointment, Victoria said eventually, though neither of us. But sitting here with you today, talking with you, I felt more like myself than I have in years. More ... alive, I guess. More interesting and interested. She paused, her eyes meeting mine directly. Is it crazy that I want to kiss you, right? Now, the question hung in the air between us like a live wire. My tool bag suddenly felt heavy in my hand, and I was acutely aware of everything, the way the afternoon light was filtering through her front windows, the faint scent of her perfume, the vulnerability in her eyes that had taken real courage to show. I mean, she continued quickly, her confidence wavering slightly. I know there's an age difference, and you're probably used to women your own age, and this is completely inappropriate since you're here working, and I'm probably making you incredibly uncomfortable, Victoria, I said softly. Setting my tool bag down, she stopped talking, looking at me with a mixture of hope and mortification. You're not making me uncomfortable, I said. And no, it's not crazy. It's not. I shook my head. The crazy part is that I've been sitting here for the past 2 hours trying to figure out how to ask if I could see you again without seeming unprofessional. The crazy part is that I haven't been able to stop thinking about how much I enjoy talking with you since the moment we started. The crazy part is that age is literally the last thing on my mind when I look at you. Victoria's expression shifted from vulnerable uncertainty to something warmer, more hopeful. Really? Really? I said, stepping closer. In fact, if you want to know the truth, you're the first person in months who's made me feel like I might actually have something interesting to say. You do, she said quietly. You absolutely do. We stood there in her front hallway, the space between us charged with possibility and uncertainty. I could hear the clock ticking on her mantel, could see dust motes dancing in the afternoon sunlight, could feel my heart beating faster than it had any right to. So, I said, my voice slightly rougher than usual, what do we do about this? Victoria smiled, and it was different from her earlier smiles. More intimate, more real. Well, she said, we could start with you telling me whether you'd like to have dinner sometime, somewhere that isn't my kitchen while you're fixing my plumbing. I laughed, feeling some of the tension easing to something more manageable. I would like that very much. Good, she said, because I was really hoping you'd say yes. My phone buzzed again. Another text from my 2 p.m. appointment. The real world was calling, reminding me that whatever this was, it was happening in the middle of our actual lives. I really do have to go, I said reluctantly. I know, Victoria said. But Alan, I'm glad you came today. For the sink and for ... everything else. Me too, I said, picking up my tool bag. More than you know. Yes. I walked to my van. I could feel Victoria watching from her doorway. When I turned back to wave, she was still there, smiling that new smile that made me feel like maybe I just walked into the beginning of something extraordinary. My phone was ringing as I drove away. My next client wondering where I was, but all I could think about was the way Victoria had looked when she asked if she could kiss me, brave and vulnerable and absolutely beautiful. It wasn't crazy at all. In fact, it might have been the sanest thing either of us had said all day. The rest of my Tuesday passed in a blur of routine service calls. But my mind kept drifting back to Victoria's front hallway and the way she'd looked when she asked if she could kiss me. I managed to fix a garbage disposal for an elderly couple on Pine Street and unclog a bathroom sink for a frazzled mother of 3. But my heart wasn't really in the work. All I could think about was the dinner invitation and how Victoria's smile had changed when I said yes by Wednesday evening. I was sitting in my apartment, staring at my phone and trying to work up the courage to call her. We hadn't exchanged numbers, but I had her contact information from the service request. Using it for personal reasons felt like crossing a line, but she had specifically mentioned dinner, so technically this was following up on her invitation, right? I was saved from my overthinking by a knock on my door. When I opened it, I found my downstairs neighbor, Mrs. Eleanor Patterson, holding a casserole dish and wearing the expression she usually reserved for delivering neighborhood gossip. Alan, dear, she said, pushing past me into my apartment without waiting for an invitation. I made too much tuna casserole again, and you know how I hate waste. Mrs. Patterson was 73, sharp as a tack, and had appointed herself as the unofficial mother figure for every single person in our building. She was also the reason I knew more about my neighbors' personal lives than I'd ever wanted to. That's very kind of you, Mrs. Patterson, I said, accepting the still warm dish. "But you know you don't have to keep feeding me." "Nonsense," she said, settling herself on my couch like she planned to stay. "A young man living alone needs proper nutrition. Speaking of which, you seem distracted lately." "Happier, but distracted. Something you want to share?" I should have known better than to think I could hide anything from Mrs. Patterson. She had an uncanny ability to read people's moods, and a complete lack of respect for personal boundaries. "Just work stuff," I said, but she was already shaking her head. "No, this is different. This is the look of a man who's met someone interesting." Her eyes lit up with curiosity. "Tell me everything." Before I could decide whether to deflect or confess, my phone rang. Victoria's name appeared on the screen, and I felt my pulse quicken. "Excuse me for just a second," I said to Mrs. Patterson, who was watching with undisguised interest. "Hi, Victoria," I answered, trying to sound casual. "Alan, hi." Victoria's voice came through the phone, warm, but slightly nervous. "I hope I'm not calling at a bad time. Got your number from the service request form." "No, not at all," I said, glancing at Mrs. Patterson, who was pretending to examine my coffee table while obviously listening to every word. "What's up?" "Well, I was thinking about our dinner conversation, or rather our conversation about having dinner, and I realized we never actually made plans. I was wondering if you might be free this Saturday evening." "I am," I said, "probably too." Quickly, "Definitely free." "Great," Victoria said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "There's a new Italian place downtown called Marco's that's supposed to be wonderful. Would 7 o'clock work for you?" "7 sounds perfect." "Wonderful." "I'm looking forward to it, Alan." "Me too," I said, really looking forward to it. After we hung up, I turned to find Mrs. Patterson watching me with a knowing expression that made me feel like a teenager who'd just been caught passing notes in class. "Well," she said, settling back on my couch, "that sounded promising."
"And what's
"Her name, Mrs. Patterson?" "Oh, don't even try to deflect, young man. I've been watching people fall in love for 7 decades. I know the signs. Besides, you're practically glowing. Now tell me about this mystery woman who's got you so flustered." I sighed, realizing I wasn't going to escape this interrogation. "Her name is Victoria. She's a customer who called for a plumbing repair. And we talked. A lot. She seems really nice." Mrs. Patterson rolled her eyes. "Alan Mitchell, you give me more details when you tell me about fixing someone's toilet? This woman has you making dinner plans and you describe her as really nice? I need more than that." Despite myself, I found myself smiling. She's a high school English teacher. She's smart, funny, and she's renovating this beautiful old house. She makes incredible coffee, and when she talks about her students or her renovation projects, her whole face lights up. "How old is she?" Mrs. Patterson asked, and something in her tone made me look at her more carefully. 51, I said honestly. Mrs. Patterson nodded thoughtfully. "Good for you. Good for me. Alan, dear, I've watched you date those silly girls your own age for the past 2 years. It's pretty enough, I'm sure, but not one of them had enough substance to keep your attention for more than a few weeks. A mature woman who knows what she wants and isn't afraid to go after it. That's exactly what you need." I stared at her, surprised by her reaction. "You don't think the age difference is weird?" "Weird?" Mrs. Patterson laughed. "Honey, when I met my Harold, he was 35 and I was 22. Everyone said he was too old for me, that it would never work. We were married for 47 years before he passed. Age is just a number when you find the right person." The next morning, my phone rang while I was loading my van for the day's appointments. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize. "Mitchell Plumbing Solutions," I answered. "Is this Alan?" The voice was female, younger than Victoria, with a slight edge of suspicion.
us?
"This is Alan. How can I help you?"
Us?
"This is Jasmine Chambers, Victoria's daughter." My stomach dropped slightly. I'd seen photos of Jasmine in Victoria's hallway, but Victoria had mentioned she lived with her father. I wasn't sure what to make of this call. "Oh," I said carefully. "Hi, Jasmine. Is everything okay? Does your mom need another repair?" "No, the plumbing's fine," Jasmine said. I'm calling because my mom mentioned she's having dinner with you this Saturday. It was a pause, and I wasn't sure if I was supposed to respond or wait for her to continue. Look, Jasmine continued, I don't know you, and my mom is. She's been through a lot. The divorce was really hard on her, and she's finally starting to seem like herself again. I just need to know that you're not going to mess with her head. I understood the protective instinct, even appreciated it, but the directness of the question caught me off guard. I would never want to hurt your mom, Jasmine. She seems like an amazing woman. She is, Jasmine said firmly. Person I know, but she's also been hurt by someone who is supposed to love her. So if you're just looking for some fun with an older woman, or if you think she's desperate because she's divorced, you need to walk away now. The protective fierceness in her voice reminded me of Victoria, the same strength, the same unwillingness to back down from difficult conversations. That's not what this is, I said honestly. I genuinely enjoy spending time with your mom. She's interesting and kind, and I'd like to get to know her better. I'm not playing games, and I'm not looking for anything casual. There was another pause, and when Jasmine spoke again, her tone had softened slightly. Good, because if you hurt her, you'll have to deal with me. Understood, I said, and found myself smiling despite the intensity of the conversation. For what it's worth, I think it's great that she has someone looking out for her. She does, Jasmine said. And just so you know, I'll be watching. After she hung up, I sat in my van for a moment, processing the conversation. Victoria's daughter was protective, direct, and clearly not afraid to speak her mind. I could see where she got it from, but underneath Jasmine's warnings, I'd heard something else. Love. Real, fierce, protective love for her mother. And despite the intimidation factor, that actually made me respect Victoria even more. Saturday couldn't arrive fast enough. But when it did, I found myself standing in front of my closet at 5:30 p.m., completely paralyzed by the simple question of what to wear. I'd been on plenty of dates before, but none of them had felt this important. None of them had involved a woman who made me want to be the best version of myself. I finally settled on dark jeans, button-down shirt that wasn't wrinkled, and the one pair of shoes I owned that didn't have paint stains on them. I spent an embarrassing amount of time trying to tame my hair, which seemed determined to stick up in the back no matter what I did to it. Marco's was a small Italian restaurant. Downtown, that I'd driven past hundreds of times, but never entered. The kind of place with white tablecloths and candles, where the prices on the menu made me do quick mental calculations about my checking account balance. But this was important. Victoria was important. I arrived 10 minutes early and sat in my van across the street, watching the restaurant entrance and trying to calm my nerves. Exactly 7 o'clock, I saw Victoria walking down the sidewalk, and my breath caught in my throat. She was wearing a deep blue dress that brought out her eyes, and she'd done something different with her hair. It was down instead of in her usual ponytail. Falling in soft waves around her shoulders, she looked elegant and confident. But when she paused at the restaurant entrance and glanced around nervously, I realized she was just as anxious about this as I was. I jogged across the street, nearly getting honked at by a taxi in my haste. Victoria. I called, and when she turned and smiled, all my nervousness melted away. Perfect timing, she said, but I could hear the slight tremor in her voice that matched how I was feeling. The hostess seated us at a corner table that felt intimate without being cramped. Victoria ordered wine, something Italian that I'd never heard of, but that sounded sophisticated when she said it. I stuck with water, partly because I was driving, and partly because I wanted to remember every detail of this evening. To confess something, Victoria said after we'd ordered our food. I've been nervous about tonight all week. Really? You seem so composed? She laughed, and some of the tension in her shoulders relaxed. Oh, that's just good teacher training. Never let them see you sweat. But the truth is, I haven't been on a proper date in 3 years. I keep worrying I've forgotten how to do this. Well, if it helps, I said, I spent 20 minutes trying to decide what shirt to wear. And I'm pretty sure I've checked my teeth for food particles at least 6 times since we sat down. You're sweet, Victoria said, reaching across the table too. Touch my hand briefly. Your teeth are fine. The conversation flowed as easily as it had on her back porch, but there was something different about being here together.
Out.
Dressed up and intentional about spending time with each other. We talked about everything, her students' latest dramatic adventures, my most ridiculous service calls, books we'd read, movies we loved, places we wanted to travel. I've always wanted to see Italy, Victoria said, gesturing around the restaurant. The real Italy, not just pictures in travel magazines. Florence, Rome, those little hill towns in Tuscany where you can see for miles. What's stopping you? Life, I guess. When I was married, Marcus always said we'd travel when we retired, when we had more money, when the timing was better. There was always a reason to wait. She paused, twirling pasta around her fork. I'm done waiting for someday. Good for you, I said, and I meant it. Life's too short to spend it waiting for permission. Is that your philosophy? It's becoming my philosophy, I said. Starting my own business was scary as hell, but it was better than spending my life working for someone else's dreams. Victoria smiled. I like that. Maybe I need to apply that thinking to other areas of my life. Like writing? Among other things, she said. And there was something in her tone that made me think she wasn't just talking about writing. The evening passed faster than I wanted it to. We lingered over dessert, then coffee, then more coffee, neither of us, seeming eager to end the night. When the waiters started giving us pointed looks, we finally acknowledged that we should probably leave. Thank you for tonight, Victoria said as we stood outside the restaurant. This was really wonderful. It was, I agreed. Would you like to do it again sometime? I would, she said, then hesitated. Alan, can I ask you something? Of course. Are we doing here? I mean, really? Because this feels like more than just dinner between new friends, but I don't want to assume. I stepped closer, close enough to catch the scent of her perfume. You're not assuming anything. This definitely feels like more than friendship to me, even with the age difference. Even knowing that I have a teenage daughter who will probably interrogate you every time she sees you, especially knowing those things I said. Victoria, you're not some abstract idea of an older woman to me. You're smart and funny and passionate about the things you care about. You make incredible coffee and you're not afraid to ask for what you want. The fact that you have life experience and a daughter who loves you enough to be protective, those aren't negatives. They're part of what makes you who you are. Victoria's eyes brightened, and for a moment I thought she might cry. You really mean that? I really do. She stood on her tiptoes and kissed my cheek, her lips soft and warm against my skin. Thank you, she whispered, for seeing me. Really? Seeing me as I walked her to her car, I felt like something fundamental had shifted between us. We were no longer just testing the waters of attraction. We were acknowledging that this connection was real and worth exploring. Same time next week? I asked as she unlocked her Honda. Actually, Victoria said, turning back to face me, would you like to come over for dinner tomorrow? Nothing fancy, just I'd like to cook for you. I'd love that, I said. Probably too. Quickly good, she said, getting into her car, because I was really hoping you'd say yes. As I watched her drive away, I realized I was grinning like an idiot. Mrs. Patterson was right. This was exactly what I needed. Someone who challenged me, who made me want to be better, who wasn't afraid to go after what she wanted. For the first time in my adult life, I felt like I might be falling in love with someone who was falling in love with me back. Sunday dinner at Victoria's house felt like stepping into a different world. She'd transformed her kitchen renovation chaos into something warm and inviting. With candles on the small dining table and jazz music playing softly in the background, the smell of something incredible filled the air, garlic and herbs and wine. That made my stomach rumble appreciatively. I hope you like chicken marsala, Victoria said, appearing from the kitchen wearing an apron over her casual clothes. It's one of the few dishes I can make that actually looks like it belongs in a restaurant. It smells amazing, I said, holding up the bottle of wine I'd brought. I wasn't sure what goes with chicken marsala, so I asked the guy at the liquor store. Seemed very confident about this one. Victoria examined the label and smiled. Choice. You can open it while I finish the sauce. I felt more relaxed in her kitchen than I had at the restaurant. Watching her move confidently between the stove and the counter, tasting and adjusting seasonings, this felt domestic in a way. That made me picture a future I'd never really imagined before. Can I help with anything? I asked. You can tell me about your most ridiculous service call this week, she said, stirring the sauce. I need entertainment while I pretend I know what I'm doing with this recipe. I launched into the story of Mrs. Henderson's emergency toilet repair that turned out to be her cat's new habit of knocking the handle, causing random flushes that convinced her the house was haunted. Victoria laughed until she had to wipe tears from her eyes, and I found myself wishing every evening could feel this easy and right. We were halfway through dinner when Victoria's phone rang. She glanced at it, frowned, and declined the call. Sorry, she said. Unknown number. Probably someone trying to sell me extended car warranty. The phone rang again immediately. This time Victoria looked genuinely annoyed. That's weird, she said, but declined the call again. Where were we? I was telling her about my plans to maybe hire an assistant when her landline started ringing. Victoria looked confused. Most people didn't even know she had a landline. I should probably answer that, she said apologetically, getting up from the table. Hello? I could hear a man's voice on the other end, angry and slurred. Victoria's face went pale. Marcus, you need to stop calling me, she said firmly, but I could hear the tremor in her voice. We've been divorced for 2 years. Shh. You can't just... The voice got louder, more aggressive. Victoria moved away from the table, toward the kitchen, but I could still hear fragments of what he was saying. Something about her embarrassing herself and men half her age. I don't know what you're talking about, Victoria said, her voice getting sharper. And frankly, it's none of your business anymore. More shouting from the phone. Victoria looked toward me with an expression of mortified apology, then back toward the kitchen. Marcus, you're drunk. I'm hanging up now. But instead of hanging, up. I heard her gasp. How do you know that? Have you been? Marcus, that's stalking. I'm calling the police if you don't leave me alone. She finally hung up and stood in her kitchen for a moment, her back to me, shoulders rigid with tension. Victoria, I said softly, are you okay? She turned around and I could see she was trying to compose herself, but her hands were shaking slightly. I'm sorry, she said. That was my ex-husband. He's been drinking, and apparently he somehow found out about our date last night. How could he know about that? I have no idea, Victoria said, coming back to the table but not sitting. Down. He said he saw pictures of me at Marco's. Which is impossible unless... double quotes. She paused, looking increasingly disturbed. Unless someone took pictures and sent them to him. My stomach dropped. Who would do that? I don't know, Victoria said, sinking into her chair. Maybe no one. Maybe he's just trying to mess with my head. He's good at that. But even as she said it, I could see she didn't believe it. Someone had been watching us last night, taking pictures, reporting back to her ex-husband. The thought made my skin crawl. What did he say exactly? I asked gently. Victoria looked embarrassed. Said I was making a fool of myself, dating someone young enough to be my son. Said people were talking about it, laughing at me. He called. You... She stopped, shaking her head. It doesn't matter what he called you. Yes, it does, I said, reaching across the table to take her hand. Victoria, this isn't okay. It's harassing you. He's drunk and angry that I'm moving on with my life, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. He'll probably forget about it by tomorrow. The phone rang again, her cell this time. Victoria looked at the screen, and her face went white. Not Marcus, she said quietly. That's a number I don't recognize, but they've called 4 times while we've been talking. Shh, answered hesitantly. Hello? This time the voice was different, older, female, but just as hostile. I could hear every word. Is this Victoria Chambers? The teacher who's been carrying on with some young man all over town? Victoria's grip on my hand tightened. Who is this? Someone who thinks you should be ashamed of yourself. Teachers are supposed to set examples, not chase after boys young enough to be their students. We know where you work, and we know what you've been doing. The line went dead. Victoria set her phone down with trembling hands. This isn't random, she said quietly. Someone is organizing this. Someone is trying to... She couldn't finish the sentence. Trying to... what? I asked, though I was starting to understand. Trying to humiliate me. To make me feel ashamed for... She gestured between us. For this, for being happy, I stood up and moved to her side of the table, kneeling beside her chair. Victoria, look at me. You have nothing to be ashamed of. Nothing. But what if they call the school? What if they make this into some kind of scandal? Then we'll deal with it, I said firmly. Together. But we're not going to let some bitter people scare you into hiding. Victoria looked at me with a mixture of gratitude and fear. You don't understand. My reputation, my job, it's all I have. Left after the divorce, if people start thinking I'm some kind of desperate older woman. Stop, I said. You're not desperate. You're not pathetic. You're a woman who deserves to be happy, and anyone who can't see that isn't worth worrying about. Even as I said the words, I could see the damage was already being done. The confidence I'd seen in Victoria the night before was cracking, placed by the fear and shame that her ex-husband and his allies were trying to instill. This wasn't just about phone calls. This was about making Victoria feel so uncomfortable, so exposed that she'd retreat back into the safe, lonely life she'd been living before. And I wasn't going to let that happen. The phone calls stopped after that night, but the damage lingered. Victoria became jumpy every time her phone rang, and I could see her second-guessing herself in ways that broke my heart. When I suggested we have dinner out again the following Friday, she hesitated in a way that told me everything I needed to know. Maybe we should keep things low-key for a while, she said, just until this blows over. Or, I said carefully, we could refuse to let some bitter people dictate how we live our lives. Victoria looked at me with a mixture of gratitude and fear. It's easy for you to say that. Alan, you don't have a classroom full of teenagers who'll Google your name if they hear rumors. You don't have parents who'll demand you be fired if they think you're setting a bad example. She was right, and I knew it. My business might take a hit if people started talking, but I wouldn't lose my livelihood. Victoria had spent 15 years building her career. They could all disappear if the wrong people decided to make her personal life their business. That's when I made a decision that surprised even me. Then let's go see your principal, I said. What? Let's go talk to your boss. Tell him what's happening before someone else does. Control the narrative instead of waiting for it to control us. Victoria stared at me like I'd suggested we rob a bank, Alan. That's crazy. Can't just walk into Dr. Morrison's office and announce that I'm dating someone 23 years younger and people are harassing me about it. Why not? You're not doing anything wrong. You're a single woman dating. A single man, that's not scandalous. It's normal. You don't understand how small towns work, Victoria said, or how school boards work. They don't fire you for what you do. They fire you for what people think you do. Then we make sure people think the right thing. I spent the next hour talking Victoria through my plan. It wasn't complicated, but it required something neither of us was comfortable with, being completely open about our relationship instead of hiding it. I'm not suggesting we take out a billboard, I said. I'm suggesting we stop acting like we're doing something shameful. We go to dinner, we go to the movies, we act like a normal couple, because that's what we are, and when people stare, when they whisper, then they stare and whisper. Victoria, the people who matter won't care about our age difference. The people who care about our age difference don't matter. It took me 3 days to convince her, but finally, Victoria agreed to try it my way. We started with something simple. Lunch at the cafe downtown on Saturday afternoon. A public place, broad daylight, nothing that could be construed as scandalous. I picked Victoria up at noon. I could see the tension in her shoulders as we walked into Maggie's cafe together. It was busy, filled with families and couples enjoying their weekend lunch. At first, nobody seemed to notice us. Then I saw Mrs. Dorothy Henley from the school board sitting at a corner table with 2 other women. Victoria saw her at the same time and instinctively stepped closer to me. It's okay, I whispered, taking her hand. We're just having lunch. Mrs. Henley didn't notice us, and I watched her lean forward to whisper something to her companions. All 3 women turned to look at us with expressions that ranged from curiosity to disapproval. Maybe this was a mistake, Victoria murmured. I said firmly, guiding her to a table in the center of the restaurant. This is exactly right. We ordered our food and talked normally, ignoring the occasional glances from other tables. Halfway through our meal, I noticed something. Most people weren't staring. Most people were focused on their own conversations, their own lives, their own problems. The world wasn't ending because a 51-year-old woman was having lunch with a 28-year-old man. As we were finishing our sandwiches, Mrs. Henley approached our table. Victoria tensed, but I squeezed her hand under the table. "Victoria, dear," Mrs. Henley said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, "how lovely to see you. Aren't you going to introduce me to your friend?" "Of course," Victoria said, her teacher voice kicking in. "Dorothy, this is Alan Mitchell.
Alan.
This is Mrs. Henley from the school board." I stood and shook her hand. "Nice to meet you, Mrs. Henley." "And what do you do, Alan?" she asked, clearly fishing for information. "I'm a plumber," I said honestly. "I own Mitchell Plumbing Solutions here in town." "How? ... Interesting," Mrs. Henley said. "And how did you two meet?" "I fixed Victoria's kitchen sink," I said with a smile. "Best service call I ever made." Victoria looked at me with surprise and something that might have been admiration. I was being completely honest, completely unapologetic, and completely normal about our relationship. "Well," Mrs. Henley said, clearly not sure how to respond. "Nice, Victoria. I hope you're planning to attend the faculty mixer next month." "I wouldn't miss it," Victoria said. "Wonderful. Perhaps you'll bring Alan as your guest." Invitation was clearly a test, but I answered before Victoria could speak. If Victoria would like me to come, I'd be honored. Mrs. Henley looked between us, realizing that her attempt to embarrass or corner us had backfired. "Well, that sounds lovely. I'll see you both there then." After she walked away, Victoria turned to me with wide eyes. "Did you just commit us to attending a school function together?" "I committed myself to attending a school function with you, if you want me there. You realize what this means? If we show up together to the faculty mixer, everyone will know. We're seriously dating." "Good," I said, "'cause we are seriously dating. At least I hope we are." Victoria was quiet for a long moment, then she smiled. The first real smile I'd seen from her in days. "You know what? Yes, let's go to the faculty mixer. Let's stop hiding. Are you sure?" "No," she said honestly, "but I'm sure about you. And I'm tired of being afraid of what other people think." As we walked out of the cafe together, Victoria's hand firmly in mine, I felt like we'd crossed an important threshold. We weren't just dating anymore, we were choosing each other, publicly and intentionally. Regardless of what anyone else thought about it, the real test would come at the faculty mixer. But for now, we were taking it one brave step at a time. The faculty mixer was still 2 weeks away, but Victoria and I decided we needed allies before then. Our public lunch had gone better than expected, but we both knew that Mrs. Henley would be making phone calls and asking questions. We needed to be prepared. "I think we should start with Jasmine," Victoria said, as we sat on her back porch Sunday morning, sharing coffee and planning our strategy. "If she's on our side, she can help counter any narratives about me being some kind of predatory older woman." I nearly choked on my coffee. "Is that really what people might think?" "It's what Marcus is probably telling people," Victoria said grimly. "That I'm having some kind of midlife crisis and taking advantage of a younger man. Trust me, in a small town, the story always gets twisted to make the woman look desperate and the man look like a victim. That's ridiculous. Anyone who's spent 5 minutes with us can see that's not what this is. You'd be surprised how little people need to see to form strong opinions," Victoria said. "But you're right about needing Jasmine's support. She's smart. She's articulate, and she's my daughter. Her opinion carries weight." Jasmine came over that evening for dinner, ostensibly to help Victoria with some college applications, but really to size me up in person. I'd spoken to her briefly on the phone since our first conversation, but this was our first face-to-face meeting. She was taller than I'd expected from the photos, with Victoria's dark eyes and a direct gaze that made me feel like I was being X-rayed. She shook my hand firmly and said, "So you're the plumber who's got my mom all flustered?" "Jasmine," Victoria warned, but she was smiling. "I'm being nice," I said. "The plumber. It's not that young guy who's probably using you for your house and your cooking." "That's your version of being nice?" I asked, laughing despite myself. "That's my version of giving you a chance to prove me wrong," Jasmine said, settling into a chair at Victoria's kitchen table. Mom says you've been getting some harassment about your relationship. Tell me about that. I liked her directness, even if it was a little intimidating. Over dinner, Victoria and I told Jasmine about Marcus's calls, the anonymous threats, and our decision to go public rather than hide. Good strategy, Jasmine said, surprising me with her immediate approval. Hiding makes you look guilty, but you're going to need more than just showing up places together. You need people vouching for you, especially people whose opinions matter in this town. Like who? Victoria asked. Well, Mrs. Patterson from your building would be good, Jasmine said, looking at me. She's been here forever and everyone knows she's a straight shooter. She says you're a good guy, people will listen. I nodded. She's already been supportive. She might be willing to help more actively. What about your students' parents? Jasmine asked Victoria. The ones who actually like you and respect your teaching. If they speak up for you, it'll be harder. For the school board to take any action? Victoria looked thoughtful. There are several parents who've been very complimentary about my classes. The Hendersons, the Martinez family, Sarah Williams, whose daughter is applying to Ivy League schools. ... Perfect. And what about other teachers? You're not the only single faculty member. Are there others who might understand what it's like too? Have their personal life scrutinized? Actually, yes, Victoria said, her confidence growing. Eric Rodriguez in the history department went through a messy divorce 2 years ago. He's been very supportive of my situation. When Cindy Walsh in. The science department has been dating someone from the next town over. She might understand the pressure of small-town gossip. I watched Jasmine orchestrate this conversation with admiration. She had her mother's intelligence, but with a strategic mind that reminded me of a chess player thinking several moves ahead. The key, Jasmine continued, is to make sure you're allies. Know the real story before someone else tells them a fake version. You need to control the narrative. How do we do that? You tell people the truth. The whole truth. You met when Mom called you for a repair job. You hit it off. You're both single adults who enjoy each other's company. You're not hiding anything. You're not ashamed of anything. And anyone who has a problem with that can mind their own business? Victoria smiled proudly at her daughter. When did you become so wise about public relations? When I decided I wanted to major in journalism, Jasmine said. This is exactly the kind of situation I've been studying.
At Small Town Scandal Social.
Media amplification, reputation management. You're basically a case study in how to handle gossip and harassment. That's reassuring, I said dryly. It should be, Jasmine said seriously, because the studies show that the best way to counter gossip is with transparency and community support. And Mom has both if she's willing to use them. The next few days became a strategic campaign that felt surprisingly methodical. Victoria reached out to supportive parents and colleagues not to ask for anything specific. It's just to maintain her normal, professional relationships and let them see for themselves that she was the same dedicated teacher she'd always been. I made sure Mrs. Patterson was fully briefed on the situation and asked if she'd be willing to speak positively about me if anyone asked. She was delighted to be included in what she called the resistance against busybodies and troublemakers. Meanwhile, Jasmine used her social media savvy to monitor online chatter about Victoria and me. She found a few posts on the local Facebook. Groups nothing too damaging, mostly curiosity and speculation, but she also found something more concerning. Mom, she said, calling Victoria while I was at her house fixing a loose cabinet hinge. You need to see this. She showed us a private Facebook group called Concerned Citizens of Riverside that had been created just 3 days ago. Only had 15 members. They were all discussing Victoria's inappropriate relationship and planning to attend the next school board meeting. This is Marcus's work, Victoria said, reading the posts with a mixture of anger and fear. This language. These talking points, it sounds exactly like him. Probably, Jasmine agreed. But look at the membership list. These aren't random people. These are mostly women around his age, and several of them are parents of kids who were in your classes years ago. Studied the names, recognizing a few. From around town, this isn't spontaneous outrage.
Oh.
This is organized. Which means, Jasmine said, we need to be organized too. The school board meeting is next Tuesday. If they're planning to show up and demand action, We need to be ready with our own people and our own message. Victoria looked overwhelmed. Can't ask parents and colleagues to come defend me at a school board meeting? That's too much. You're not asking them to defend you? I said, understanding what Jasmine was getting at. You're asking them to speak the truth about who you are as a teacher and a person. That's very different. Exactly, Jasmine said. And if these concerned citizens want to make a public issue out of your private life, then they need to be prepared to face public pushback from people who actually know and respect you. As I looked at Victoria and Jasmine planning their counteroffensive, I realized that whatever Marcus and his allies had hoped to accomplish with their harassment campaign, they'd badly miscalculated. They'd assumed Victoria would retreat, would be embarrassed into hiding. Instead, they'd given her a reason to fight back, surrounded her with people who were willing to fight alongside her. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. On Monday morning, the day before the school board meeting, Mrs. Patterson knocked on my apartment door at 7 a.m., holding her phone and wearing the expression of someone who discovered buried treasure. "Alan, dear," she said, bustling past me. "Into my apartment. You need to see this right now."
Ow!
She thrust her phone at me, showing a Facebook conversation screenshot. "My granddaughter lives in Cedar Falls. That's where Marcus moved after the divorce. She sent me this last night." Squinted at the small text, trying to read the conversation. It was from a local Facebook group in Cedar Falls, and Marcus was clearly visible in the profile picture. Responding to someone's post about dealing with ex-wives who won't move on. "Look what he wrote," Mrs. Patterson said, pointing to a specific comment Marcus had posted. "Tell me about it. My ex is so desperate to prove she's still attractive that she's dating some kid barely out of college. I've been having friends back in Riverside keep an eye on the situation. We're organizing a little intervention to help her see how ridiculous she looks. Sometimes public embarrassment is the only thing that works with delusional women." I read it twice, my anger building with each word. "This is evidence. This proves he's behind the harassment campaign." "It gets better," Mrs. Patterson said, swiping to another screenshot. "Look at who liked and commented on that post." I saw several names I recognized from the Concerned Citizens group, including Dorothy Henley. But what made my blood run cold was seeing a comment from a woman named Linda Walsh. "We've got it handled on our end. She won't know what hit her at tomorrow's meeting. Mrs. Patterson, this is huge. We need to show this to Victoria and Jasmine immediately." "Already done," she said proudly. "I sent it to Victoria an hour ago. That girl is sharp. She's already contacted some lawyer friend of hers about harassment laws." When I arrived at Victoria's house 20 minutes later, I found her and Jasmine huddled over her laptop with several printed pages spread across the kitchen table. "This changes everything," Jasmine said without looking up. "We've got evidence of organized harassment, conspiracy to damage Mom's reputation, proof that this is being coordinated by her ex-husband from another city." Victoria looked up at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Not fear or uncertainty, but focused determination. Marcus made a mistake. He put his plan in writing in a public forum where people could screenshot it. "What's our next move?" I asked. "We're going to that school board meeting," Victoria said firmly. "But not to defend ourselves. We're going to expose what's really happening here." Jasmine pulled up another document on her laptop. "I spent all morning researching harassment laws and school board policies. Organized campaigns to damage a teacher's reputation based on personal vendettas violates several district policies. If the school board acts on complaints that stem from this kind of harassment, they could face legal action themselves." "You think they'll back down?" I asked. "I think they'll have to," Victoria said. "Because I'm not just bringing this evidence to the school board meeting, I'm bringing it to the local newspaper, the district office, and if necessary, to a lawyer who specializes in workplace harassment. Are you sure you want to escalate it this far?" I asked, concerned about the stress this was putting on her. Victoria stood up and walked to the window, looking out at her garden where she'd planted new flowers just weeks ago. When she turned back to me, her expression was resolute. "Alan, for 2 years after my divorce, I lived quietly. I didn't date, didn't socialize much, didn't do anything that might attract attention or criticism. I convinced myself I was being mature and professional, but really I was just hiding." She stepped closer to me. Then you showed up to fix my sink, and for the first time in years, I felt like myself again. I felt interesting and alive and worth someone's attention. I'm not giving that up because my bitter ex-husband wants to punish me for moving on. We fight, I said. So we fight, she agreed. But we fight smart, with evidence and allies, and the truth on our side. Jasmine closed her laptop with a satisfied click. Tomorrow night is going to be very interesting. The Riverside School District Board meeting room had never seen anything like Tuesday night. What was usually a sparsely attended monthly formality had turned into standing room only, with people lined up against the walls and spilling into the hallway. I sat in the third row next to Victoria, who looked calm and professional in a navy blazer that somehow made her appear both approachable and formidable. Behind us sat our allies, Mrs. Patterson, Eric Rodriguez, Cindy Walsh, and a surprising number of parents who'd come to support Victoria. Jasmine sat at the end of our row with a small recording device and a manila folder full of printed evidence. Across the aisle, I could see the concerned citizens group clustered together near the front. Dorothy Henley was whispering urgently to Linda Walsh, both of them shooting occasional glances in our direction. They looked confident, prepared for what they clearly thought would be an easy victory. They had no idea what was coming. Dr. Morrison, the school principal, opened the meeting with routine business budget reports, curriculum updates, facilities maintenance. The tension in the room was palpable as everyone waited for the public comment period. "We'll now open the floor for public comments," announced the board chairman. "Please state your name and limit your remarks to 3 minutes." Dorothy Henley stood first, smoothing her skirt and walking to the podium with the air of someone who'd been planning this moment for weeks. "Good evening. I'm Dorothy Henley, and I've lived in this community for 37 years. I'm here tonight because I'm deeply concerned about the conduct of one of our teachers." She turned slightly to look directly at Victoria. "Ms. Victoria Chambers has been engaging in a relationship that I believe compromises her ability to serve as a role model for our children." A murmur rippled through the room. Victoria's hand found mine under the table. "Ms. Chambers is carrying on with a man 23 years her junior," Henley continued. "They've been seen together at restaurants, flaunting this inappropriate relationship around town. As educators, we must hold ourselves to higher standards." Linda Walsh stood next, her voice shaking with manufactured outrage. "I agree completely. Teachers are supposed to set examples of appropriate behavior. This kind of desperate, attention-seeking conduct is exactly what we don't want our teenagers to think is acceptable." 3 more members of their group spoke, each echoing similar themes about appropriateness, role models, and community standards. I felt Victoria tense beside me with each criticism, but she remained perfectly still. When they finished, the room fell silent. The board chairman looked toward our section. "Are there other comments?" Mrs. Patterson stood up, all 5 feet 2 inches of her radiating indignation. "Yes, there certainly are." She walked to the podium with purpose, adjusted the microphone, and looked directly at the board members. "My name is Eleanor Patterson, and I've lived in this community for 43 years, longer than Mrs. Henley, I might add. I know Alan Mitchell personally. He's my neighbor, and he's one of the finest young men I've ever met. He's honest, hardworking, and respectful. I say if Victoria Chambers is smart enough to recognize those qualities, then I applaud her judgment." Sarah Williams, parent of one of Victoria's AP students, spoke next. "Ms. Chambers helped my daughter get into Yale University. She spent countless hours working with her on college essays and scholarship applications. Any suggestion that she's unfit to teach is absolutely ridiculous." Eric Rodriguez approached the podium. "I'm a fellow teacher, and I've worked with Victoria for 8 years. Her personal life is no one's business but her own. The suggestion that dating someone younger somehow disqualifies her from teaching is both sexist and absurd." One by one, Victoria's supporters spoke. Parents praised her dedication. Colleagues defended her professionalism. Community members questioned why anyone's private life was being scrutinized at a public meeting. Then Jasmine stood up. "I have some information the board needs to hear," she said, walking to the podium with the manila folder. My name is Jasmine Chambers. Victoria is my mother. She opened the folder and pulled out the printed Facebook screenshots. These comments were posted by Marcus Chambers, my mother's ex-husband, in a public Facebook group. He admits to organizing this harassment campaign and specifically mentions having friends in Riverside help with what he calls an intervention. She read Marcus's comments aloud, her voice clear and steady. The room went completely silent. Mrs. Henley, Jasmine continued, your name appears in the comments supporting this harassment campaign. This isn't about community standards. This is about a bitter ex-husband trying to humiliate and control a woman who had the courage to divorce him and build a new life. Dorothy Henley's face went white. Linda Walsh was staring at the floor. Jasmine looked directly at the board members. This is organized harassment based on personal vendetta, and it violates multiple district policies about how employee complaints must be handled. If this board takes any action based on these orchestrated complaints, my mother will have grounds for legal action against both the harassers and the district. The board chairman cleared his throat uncomfortably. Thank you for that information. The board will take everything under consideration. Victoria finally stood and walked to the podium. When she spoke, her voice was steady and clear. I am a dedicated teacher who has served this community faithfully for 15 years. My personal life is my own, and I will not be shamed for finding happiness with a good man. If anyone has legitimate concerns about my teaching performance, I invite them to observe my classroom or speak with my students. Otherwise, I expect this matter to be closed. She returned to her seat, and the room erupted in applause. The board went into executive session immediately after the public comments ended, but the real celebration happened in the parking lot. Victoria was surrounded by colleagues and parents, all offering congratulations and support. I watched from a few feet away as she hugged Sarah Williams and thanked Eric Rodriguez, her face glowing with relief and vindication. You did it, Mom, Jasmine said, appearing beside me with tears in her eyes. You actually did it. We did it, Victoria corrected, reaching for both of us. I couldn't have faced this alone. Mrs. Patterson bustled over, practically vibrating with excitement. Did you see Dorothy Henley's face when you read those Facebook posts? Thought she was going to faint right there at the microphone? Best part, Eric Rodriguez added, joining our group, was watching Linda Walsh try to disappear into her seat. I don't think I've ever seen someone look so mortified. 20 minutes later, Dr. Morrison appeared at the door and called Victoria aside. They spoke briefly, and when she returned, she was smiling. The board voted unanimously to dismiss all complaints as unfounded, she announced. Dr. Morrison also said they're implementing new policies about how personal grievances can be brought against faculty members. Apparently, Jasmine's legal research was very persuasive. The crowd began to disperse, but Victoria caught my hand. Would you like to come back to my place? I think this calls for a celebration. Back at Victoria's house, we sat on her back porch, with glasses of wine, finally able to relax for the first time in weeks. Jasmine had gone home to call her father, not Marcus, but her stepfather who'd raised her and been worried about the harassment situation. I still can't quite believe it's over, Victoria said, curled up beside me on the porch swing. For weeks, I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop. I kept thinking maybe they were right. Maybe I was being foolish. Do you still think that? I asked. Victoria looked at me, her eyes soft in the porch light. No. Tonight proved something important. When I stood up at that podium and spoke the truth about who I am and what I want, it felt right. It felt like me. It was you, I said. The strongest, most courageous version of you. I wouldn't have found that strength without you, she said quietly. Not just tonight, but from the beginning. You made me remember that I deserved to be happy. That age was just a number. That love doesn't follow rules or timelines. I set down my wine glass and turned to face her fully. Victoria, can I ask you something? Of course. I thought back to that first day in her kitchen when she'd asked if it was crazy that she wanted to kiss me. It seemed like a lifetime ago. Now, but the feeling was the same. That sense of possibility, of stepping into something beautiful and unknown. That first day, when you asked if you could kiss me, I said, I never actually answered properly. Victoria smiled, remembering, "You said it wasn't crazy. That was answer enough." "But I never said yes," I pointed out. "I never said that I wanted you to kiss me too, that I'd been thinking about it from the moment I met you, and now?" she asked, moving closer. "Now I'm saying yes," I whispered. "To the kiss, to everything, to whatever this becomes." Me then, soft and sweet, and full of promise. Tasted like wine and victory and new beginnings. When we broke apart, she was smiling that smile that had captured me from the very first day. "I love you," she said simply. "I know that might be moving too fast, but after tonight, after everything we've been through together, I don't want to waste time being cautious. I love you too," I said, and meant it completely. "I've probably loved you since you offered me that first cup of incredible coffee." We sat there in comfortable silence, watching fireflies dance in her garden. The house that had been her fresh start was now our beginning. The kitchen sink I'd come to fix had led to something I'd never known I was looking for. "So what happens now?" Victoria asked. "Now we build something together," I said. "Whatever you want it to be." She leaned against my shoulder, and I could feel her smiling. "I want it to be real. I want it to be ours. And I want it to last. And that's what we'll make," I promised, and kissed the top of her head. For the first time since this all began, the future felt wide open and full of possibilities. 6 months later, the kitchen renovation was finally complete. Victoria's farmhouse sink gleamed under new pendant lights, surrounded by custom cabinets that I'd built myself during weekend visits that had gradually become weekend stays. The house had transformed from a renovation project into a home. Our home. "Hand me that wrench," Victoria called from under the kitchen island, where she was installing the final cabinet hardware. She'd insisted on learning basic home repair, claiming she never wanted to be helpless with a toolbox again. "You know," I said, watching her confidently handle the project, "I'm going to run out of things to fix around here." "Don't worry," she said, emerging with a satisfied grin. "I've got a whole list of projects for the upstairs bathroom. And Jasmine wants us to build her a loft bed for her new room." Jasmine's new room. That had been a conversation that took weeks to navigate carefully. When Victoria and I decided to move in together, we'd worried about how Jasmine would react to essentially gaining a stepfather figure only a few years older than herself. But Jasmine, with her usual directness, had simply said, "If you make Mom happy and don't try to act like my dad, we'll get along fine." So far, we were getting along better than fine. Jasmine had even started bringing friends over regularly, apparently enjoying having a cool older brother who could fix their cars and explain how plumbing worked. The doorbell rang, and Victoria wiped her hands on a towel. "That'll be Mrs. Patterson. She's bringing her famous apple pie to celebrate the kitchen completion." Mrs. Patterson had become our unofficial family member, dropping by with food and neighborhood gossip, offering unsolicited, but usually accurate, relationship advice, taking full credit for making this romance happen by connecting us through her granddaughter's Facebook sleuthing. As Victoria headed to the door, I looked around the kitchen that had brought us together. The same farmhouse sink where I'd first been elbow-deep in plumbing problems now held fresh flowers from Victoria's garden. The space that had been chaos and renovation stress had become the heart of our shared life. My phone buzzed with a text from my newest employee, Eric, a recent trade school graduate who'd answered my ad for an assistant. Business had been booming since the school board incident. Apparently standing up to bullies was good for one's reputation. The text read, "Water heater emergency on Pine Street. Should I handle it or wait for you?" I typed back, "Handle it. You've got this." Victoria returned with Mrs. Patterson, who was carrying a pie and wearing a smug expression. "Well," she announced, "I have news. Dorothy Henley is moving to Florida to live with her sister. Apparently she found Riverside a bit too politically challenging after the school board incident." Victoria and I exchanged glances. We'd heard through the grapevine that several members of Marcus's conspiracy had faced social consequences for their actions. The local newspaper had run a follow-up story about harassment in small communities that hadn't painted them in a flattering light. "Good riddance," Mrs. Patterson continued. "And Linda Walsh has been very quiet lately." I think people learned something about the difference between concern and cruelty. As we sat around Victoria's kitchen table, our kitchen table sharing pie and stories, I marveled at how ordinary it all felt. This was what happiness looked like. Sunday afternoons with people you loved, projects completed together, a future that felt solid and real. You know what I realized today? Victoria said, reaching for my hand across the table. When you first fixed this sink, I thought I was hiring a plumber. I had no idea I was inviting my future into my kitchen. Best service call I ever made, I replied, echoing what I'd told Dorothy Henley all those months ago. And the best coffee I ever served, Victoria said, squeezing my hand. Outside, autumn was settling over Rosewood Drive, painting the neighborhood in warm colors that matched the life we were building together. The kitchen sink worked perfectly, but more importantly, so did we. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.